Hello, everybody, and welcome to another author interview on the podcast. Today, I have the pleasure of being joined by Josiah Bancroft. He's the author
Hello.
of the books of... Hello, Josiah. He's the author of the Books of Babel tetralogy, including Senlin Ascends, Arm of the Sphinx, The Hod King, and Fall of Babel, which was released today. Before settling down to write fantasy novels, Josiah was a poet, college instructor, rock musician, and aspiring comic book artist. When he's not writing, he enjoys recording the Crit Face podcast with his friends, drawing the world of the tower, and cooking dinner without a recipe because he's a badass. How are you, Joe?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Yeah, first of all, I want to congratulate you on the release of The Fall of Babel and the conclusion of the Books of Babel series. How are you feeling about
It's a
everything?
momentous occasion. Well, it's one of those things that you prepare for many years, and then once it's here, it's sort of you realize you can't be fully prepared to say goodbye to something like that. It's been great. It's been bittersweet, but I feel a great sense of accomplishment and relief.
Yeah, I can imagine. And in general, how are you doing these days? How's life?
Oh, being the father of a youngling, I'm constantly balancing several things poorly at the same time, forgetting things and commitments. I am scrabbling to get any time to work, though when I do, it tends to be pretty unproductive. I think everything is sort of a little bit rattly and loose right now, but this is like one of those times in life where you got to just make hay while the sun shines and enjoy the life that you have and the child that you have. And so, my priorities at this point right now are more leaning towards family than professional stuff. I'll say that.
Yeah, and I mean, exactly what you described is like the majority of parents' lives is how do I figure out how to do everything else besides being a parent and make it work? And it's a struggle.
Yeah. And then when you come back to doing the thing that you used to love and be really good at, you're like, wow, I remember being better at this and this being easier. Like, what's going on? And it's like the kind of glide that you establish when you are unencumbered with children is hard to recapture in 15-minute snatches between naps. It's a challenge.
Well, I mean, you probably still play music, but like,
Oh, no.
15 minutes.
No.
Yep.
We gave that up. Nah, it was the last time we played together in a room as a band. Sharon was, I think, 9 months pregnant, and we were like, "We'll see you again." That was a lie. we never returned. I hope to one day. I'd kind of like to do like what was like a Partridge Family sort of thing. Like Maddie can learn how to play the bassoon, and I can play the bass, and we can have like a lot of fun playing live. That's a goal.
That's a dream. She can start with the recorder, and then she can level up as things go.
Mm-hmm. And yes, and I do realize how crazy that is because the grandparents have already given her like a recorder, and she just blows it like a dog whistle. So I mean, we got a long way to go. We're not there yet.
I mean, the recorder is like base level stuff. You got like a recorder, an ocarina. Mm-hmm. It took me a long time to get past that in elementary school. So your daughter's good to go. She's on a good path. Yeah,
that's good to hear.
And to give listeners a bit of background about you, what did you grow up reading, and how did that influence you leading into your adult life?
I was like one of the kids that growing up, my mom would drop me off at the library for 3 hours in the summer, especially like because we lived in the deep South where it was 1,000 degrees because we're closer to the sun, and you could only be outside for so long. And so I would retreat to the library, which was this, just wonderful place filled with all sorts of opportunities. And so I really, when I was young, loved to read atlases, encyclopedias, and like the old books that like detailed the battlements of castles and the armor of knights. And I was reading stuff that was well beyond me. As long as I had pictures, I was pretty good. And I learned that at a young age that one of the tricks to reading something that you didn't understand was just to read the dialogue. And so, for years, I would read books that were well above my understanding, but just the dialogue was. I was like, I can get the gist of what's happening, and of course, I didn't. But so, in that way, I kind of like bounced off the surface of a lot of classics and adventure novels, and then I kind of graduated to fantasy and choose your own adventure and sci-fi when I was a little bit older. I had a little bit more of a focus. And so, like most people from my generation, grew up reading C.S. Lewis and Tolkien, and those kind of like heavy hitters. Lango was another one who was very influential when I was young. So yeah, I mean, it kind of like I got into fantasy after first spending a lot of time in the library reading Audubon's Book of Birds. So I kind of came at it sideways, but yeah.
But I feel like a lot of those obscure books and that just sort of odd flavor makes its way into the series a lot of the time. So I'm sure, like, as you got older, you look back on those days fondly. And
I do, and I think like, if people like assume that there's like some sort of, not assume it's the books are kind of esoteric in their influences, but there's not always a rhyme or reason to it. It's like some of my favorite artists, musical artists growing up, were my favorites because they were one of the few tapes that they had at the library. So, I developed this like deep fondness for Michael Penn, who's a relatively unknown, lesser known rock artist from the early 90s, because he was one of the 3 cassettes that was there. It's like it was him, Enya, and then I think a Kenny G. So,
what a good spread. What a good spread.
Yeah. I think so that the books are sort of the same way. The influences that I kind of came across were it was buckshot and random, and I think that my knowledge of things is very surface level, but diffuse. So
yeah, and a lot of it kind of coming through osmosis, I imagine. Just stuff that you've kind of picked up throughout your life and think back on and say, "Oh, that was really interesting. Like maybe I could twist that in some way and play with it." And as you got older,
instead of like making small talk and having conversations with people, I would just, drift off into my own little world and write a notepad and be obnoxious in that way. But hey,
like, oh, there's Josiah again. Oh man. And as you got older, you had aspirations to become a comic book artist. Sort of, how did that pan out? Also, you're a college instructor. How did your journey towards becoming a writer happen? And how would you say that those things influenced you as you started to invest more time into fiction writing?
Yeah, I think like a lot of kids, I developed a bucket list, like the things I just wanted to do. And at a very early age, I realized just from observing adults, no one cares. I mean, like sometimes you'll have parents that are overbearing and really care a lot, but in the long run, when no one's looking, which is most of the time, no one cares. And so you had this opportunity to do anything. And so as a kid, I was like, well, I want to be a comic book artist. I want to be in a rock band. I want to teach. I want to be a DJ at a radio station. I just had this list of stuff I wanted to do. I wanted to be a fiction author. I want to write some fantasy. And I just sort of started working through it. I mean, just because I wanted to do it. And so, the comic book artist thing was one of those. I failed out of art school. I lasted about a semester, got all D's. Getting D's in early art school takes effort. A lack of effort. It takes a lot of lack of effort. So that didn't discourage me from continuing to draw comics. I had a friend, and we did a lot of independent comics. We did like indie strips for a local print rag, the sort of punk rock. And I got to check it off the list. Like, I want to do this and take it as far as I can and see if I'm any good at it. And I did that for 3 or 4 years, and was like, I'm just not great at this. This is not. I'm okay, but I'm not great. And so then I moved on to the next thing, which was getting back into school and trying to get grades that weren't D's. And I managed that. And then I taught for a while because I wanted to be a teacher. And that was a really rewarding decade. Then I wanted to be a poet because I thought that was like going to be like comic book artist was a little bit too practical. I wanted to do something a little off the wall. So I spent a long time trying to be a poet, and I got that. I don't know, like published like maybe 50 poems. So I did it enough to be like, okay, I've done that. That was okay. I can check that off the list. And that's kind of like the same thing with the rock band. I was like, I want to, because again, no one's paying attention, and that's such a wonderful thing and a privilege, because I know a lot of people can't just do what I've been doing, but I've made certain sacrifices and choices in other parts of my life to prioritize this sort of create a bucket list. So I think one of the things I want to do before I die is community theater. Not good community theater, but like really bad community theater, like where people forget their lines and just sort of riff for a while. I want to do that. I would like to bomb at like a comedy club. I think that would be fun. So I got more things to do. I feel like I can check off fantasy author and go on to the next thing.
But I feel like it's a good mentality to have, where you can have the dreams or desire to try different things, to have a bucket list, whatever, but also pivot, because I think pivoting is very difficult for a lot of people. But if you can really fuck up in certain aspects and then just pivot and try another thing, I have some friends who are like, I applaud you. You're super good at pivoting. I find myself pretty good at it too. But
that's wonderful. Yeah.
It's a really underrated talent for people to have, to be like, I failed, I'm going to try something else, and leading into becoming a fiction writer.
And also just,
no, go ahead.
I also say the thing that I have done is just defining what I think success is, and so I wanted to be a radio DJ. So I signed up at my local independent radio station. And they're like, oh, we got a slot for you. It's from 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. On Saturday. I was like, well, that's awful. I'm like, oh yeah, nobody wants to do it. I was like, I'll do it. And so I was like, it's a technicality, but I was a DJ and I got to play the music I wanted to play. And it was fun to sit in the booth and screw around with the turntables and the dials. And so I defined that as success. If I had been like, I want to be, the next Stern, I want to be paid, I want to be appreciated, that was not going to work, And so, it is about pivoting, but it's also about deciding what you call success or sufficient. So I think, having a taste for failure, an ability to pivot, and being okay with mediocrity, all those things together, give you a lot of latitude in life.
And I think Books of Babel would be perfect for, I think there's a lot of room there to translate it into really mediocre community theater. So I think that would be fantastic.
Oh,
yeah. So just get someone with a horrible, just shitty prosthetic nose to be Senlin, and just let it flow.
Right.
Let people forget the lines.
It's going to be me when I write this. I'm going to be Senlin and maybe also Maria. I will see. I mean, I don't want to box myself in. I'm pretty versatile as an actor, having never done it. But how hard can it be?
Well, at some point you have to.
I'm going to get
kiss
notes
yourself
from friends about that.
You've got some tricky scenes in there if you're going to be both
high school all over again.
Oh man.
Mm.
So when you transitioned into a writer, what was the sort of origins of the Books of Babel series, or at least Senlin Ascends, and how did you decide, like, this is something I'm going to put time into and actually see through?
Sure. Well, so the origin is sort of a combination of getting frustrated with poetry. I've been writing poetry for a while. I got tired of being pretty good at it. I was like, I think I care about this too much to be satisfied with pretty good. So I was getting my feelings hurt. And that meant it was time to change, pivot, try something new. And so I was burned out on writing, which was problematic because I still writing is fun, and getting burned out on one sort of genre was a problem for me. And so I went back and I revisited a lot of the stuff that I had read as a kid, those adventure stories from the Victorian age, and fantasy and science fiction. And what I discovered is a lot of that stuff from the Victorian era is super duper problematic and terrible. Like you kind of like when I was reading just a dialogue as a 12-year-old, I was like, oh, these guys are cool. Going back, like, oh, these guys are not cool at all, man. They were not cool. And so I kind of wanted to reclaim some of that genre of, adventure from the sort of steam era. And I also had been reading a lot of prose poetry, so I've been reading Italo Calvino's The Invisible Cities, and that's this imaginary travelogue. So I mashed those two things together, and slowly what I would call the vintage of Senlin emerged. It's once again just sort of grasping around until you find something that works or seems okay. My goal with Senlin Ascends was just to finish the damn thing, because I had failed to finish novels many times before. I'd get 100, 150 pages into it and it would die. And so that was, I told myself it could be a bad book, but it has to be finished so I can check it off the list, because I don't want this to be one of those unfinished things. But then, like a complete idiot, I was like, but it could also be a series. That can't be that hard to write. This surely could just take me a couple of weeks. I'll knock this down 10 years later. So I absolutely bit off more than I could chew, but, that's how it goes.
Yeah, but 10 years later, and it's like, cool, I did it. I think that's a very soft applause there.
Yeah. Man, I will say not a lot of my friends have written, a fantasy series. That's not true anymore. Actually, most of my friends have written a fantasy series. I guess everyone's done it. It's not that cool.
Yeah, got to pivot. Move on. So when the book, you had it finished, where did it come into the decision making to self-publish it? Because that's how it was first released. And what was the market like back then? Because that was back in, I guess, like 2013 or so. I think it was a while ago.
I self-published it originally. It came out in 2013. Yeah, February 2013. I started working on it in 2011. But I knew from the start that I was going to self-publish it because that was sort of in that period of time where self-publishing suddenly seems like this sort of fertile soil. There's this sort of feeling of like the Yukon gold rush. Like all you have to do is put some words together and you just slap it on Amazon and people start throwing coins at you. There's gold in them there hills, So I was like, okay, I can do that. And the good thing about doing that is self-publishing is you don't have to deal with people who are like, editors who have ideas about what you should do, and copy editors who think they know how to spell words that you just have a feeling about. You can just do it all yourself, and that was important to me. I didn't want to negotiate. I really wanted to have this vision be mine, because I don't looking back, I don't know. But that so that was another reason I did self-publishing. It was this sort of, it was supposed to be easy money, immediate fame, and you got to do whatever you wanted to do. It seemed really punk rock. What happened was I got into it and it was none of those things. It was just, and also like you really do need a copy editor. Like those people are important. You should get one and pay them well, because you look like a dingus. Oh yeah. So but I thought like, I teach grammar and grade papers, so I don't need a copywriter. It's like, yeah, you do, buddy. So I put it all together. Got Ian to do the cover art for it. Ian was somebody I grew up with, like when I was writing those fantasy stories when I was 11 or 12. Ian was drawing the illustrations, so we've known each other since we were kids. We've always kept in touch, and so when I came to him and said, like, I've written this book, can you draw the cover? He said, sure. And I was like, and I can't pay you because I got no money. And he said, don't care. And he did it, and then he spent the next 2 years dragging me around to comic conventions and teaching me to sell the book by hand, one at a time, to strangers, which I got to tell you is a hard way to sell a fantasy book. So that's the next step for me. After I got my box of books, I learned how to look people in the eye or in the ear, sometimes just the top of their head, and talk to them about my work in a way that they would find compelling. And it took me a while, but I figured that out. And then I started working on the second book. But at some point when I was in the middle of kind of finishing up the second book, it occurred to me that like I hadn't really sold many copies of the first book. and selling a sequel to a book that no one's read, pretty hard. That's a hard sell. So it dawned on me that this was a dumb idea. This whole thing was a doomed enterprise. I had done the one thing I set out to do initially, which was to finish a book. I'd finished a book. I finished 2 books. And then I was like, all right, let's move on to the next thing. So yeah, the transition to the next step really began again with my old friend failure.
But then where was the thinking in your head? Where had you heard of the self-published fantasy book Off? I think that's it, right?
Yeah.
When did you first hear about that, and when did it come into your mind to think like, I should submit the books that I've written?
Well, that was really just a product of scouring the web for any opportunities to promote the book. I mean, you realize that when you self-publish it, it took a long time for me to cop on to the fact that I was not only the writer and the very bad copywriter and the middling layout artist, but I was also the marketer and I was a publicist and all those other things that I just was not doing because I was not good at them. So I started to submit the books to online reviewers, scour blogs and book communities for people who might read it, and it was in one of those sort of rabbit holes that I discovered Mark Lawrence's contest. And that was in the, I want to say like the spring of 2016. Yeah, I think that's right. Spring 2016. That sounds right. And I submitted it, and it was the absolute last. I submitted Senlin Ascends. It was the last thing I did, and like the next week or the next month, I deleted all of my social media accounts where I had spent years shouting into the void, which I think we all know is exhausting. It's exhausting. It's humiliating. It's like, I'm okay with being irrelevant, but why does it have to be part of my daily ritual? Can I just like languish in anonymity like a normal? Like why make this part of what I do? And so I deleted it all. I deleted my website. I swore off the Books of Babel, changed my name, moved to a new state, quit my job. I did several of those things for real. Not change my name. It's still the same ridiculous name. But yeah, I quit. And then that summer is when the book was brought to Mark Lawrence's attention by a reviewer from Pornikitch named Jared, who wrote this compelling write-up where he ultimately chose a different book by my now friend Phil Tucker. But Mark was moved by this kind of hand-wringing account of how Jared had really liked my book, but ultimately decided to go with, I just forgot, Path of Flames, Path of the Black Gate Saga. I think that's right. Phil, I'm sorry, buddy. The Path of Flames. Okay, just edit all that out and just robot voice it in.
I'm not going to edit any of that out. Phil's going to be listening to this, and he's just going to shake his head.
Love you, Phil. Yeah, so it was this kind of random thing when Mark read that write up, and I was not a finalist. I didn't make it to the last round. Phil did, but Mark decided to read the book anyway, and he read it, and he liked it for whatever reason, and so that kind of started off the whole transition from quitting self-publishing to struggling in traditional publishing, which is the new phase. I think everyone struggles in traditional publishing. It's not easy. This is a new world.
And what was that transition like for you? And what's your take now that you have the hindsight of self-publishing and all 4 books have been released traditionally? What's your kind of perspective on it now?
It's as naive and stupid as I was when I self-published. I carried over that same naivety and stupidity to publishing. And so I feel like one of the things I appreciate about myself is I don't really learn anything in life. I'm just staggering through from one occurrence to the next, surprised, delighted, confused, and then, slowly move towards the door. Go.
Along for the ride.
No, it's been great. Yeah, apparently I'm just, I don't know what I'm doing. So whenever anyone asks me like, what's the secret? I'm like, man, be super duper lucky and try as hard as you can to be grateful, which is hard because anytime you get involved and I have never been involved in a creative enterprise that was actually supposed to make money. But everything I've described before, like the band, comic books, being a DJ, it was all a lark. Poetry. Do you know how much like the best paid poetry makes in America? McDonald's money. Like there's no money in any of this stuff. So it was weird to move into something that was professional. It took me a while to kind of cop on to that, and so it comes like its own stresses and it's different, not in a bad way. But again, I would say naive. But the great thing is that you have a team of people like an editor and a copy editor and a marketer and a publicist and all these people who are really good at their jobs and smart and don't suck like you do at that stuff. And they swoop in and they just do a lot of the things that I couldn't do. And for that, I will always be grateful. And that process of kind of, meeting new people as you enter a new realm is really interesting. I've met a lot of people who are a lot smarter than me, which I like people who are smarter than me because I can stand next to them and go, and that makes me look like smarter. So and
it instills you with a little bit more confidence too. It instills you with a little bit more confidence.
Say that. No, I don't. No. Confidence is for people who have self-reflection. I find that the best thing that I'm like a shark. I'm like a creative shark. You keep on eating. You look for swimmers in the shallows, and you try to stay out of the pictures. Don't go anywhere near the boats. So I don't confidence. No, but gratitude. I have that. I'm very grateful.
Yeah. And in terms of the publishing journey, what was something that stood out to you as like this moment where you realized, oh shit, it's happening. My books are going to be published, because I think it was like a 1-2 punch of Senlin Ascends and Arm of the Sphinx in the same year. Since they were already
it was very yeah, and then I had to start writing the third book again, which I'd quit. I'd written I don't know, like 150 pages of the Hod King, and then put it in a drawer because I'm like I'm not going to write this just for my mom. I love my mom, but just for her. So there's this moment where I was talking to Mark Lawrence set me up with his agent, Ian Drury, who said, "Can you come up and meet me at a cafe in New York to talk about your work?" I was like, "Sure, I'll come to the ball, Cinderella." It seems so silly. No one's ever asked me to do something like that before. And as I was riding the train up to New York, I had a friend come with me, my bandmate, the guitarist from my band Dirt. I was like, "Can you just come with me and make sure I get there? Like I don't wander off or get lost or just decide you know what? Never mind. I'm just going to go hang out by the wharf and I'll go home and lie to my wife about what happened." So he went with me to make sure I would actually go and sit down and be like a human, normal person. But it was on that train ride up there. I was like, "Oh my God, like this might be something. This might not be what has always been before, which is a lot of fun, but you have to work at Applebee's as a dishwasher, which is not fun. But drawing comics is fun, so kind of up and down." So I was riding that train. I remember looking out the window at the New York skyline and thinking, "This is it, boy. You've made it now." It's like no, one of those silly cliche moments. Oh God, I'm sorry I said any of that.
so cinematic. I'm just imagining you all bright faced and smiling. I made it to the big city.
No. Yeah. It was sort of like that, and also like my friend was like, "You have to get off the train." I was like, "Let's just go home. Let's not do this." I don't like doing things. I don't like going places and talking to people. I'm like I said, I'm like the kid with the notepad writing stupid crap while other people are having conversations about important things. That's just who I am.
Well, speaking of important things, now that the series is finished, have you had some time to reflect on what it feels like, the journey that you've taken, publication, all that stuff, what it feels like to have started this series and now book 4 is out, and what does it feel like?
Uh, there were so many points along the way where I thought, I'm never going to finish this thing. I wish I'd never started this thing. This is an impossible mistake that I've made. And then once it became a public mistake, I was like, oh God, now I've got to finish it. So there's this overwhelming sense of relief. I mean, it's just, accomplishment is one thing. Accomplishment is something I feel like when I'm 60 and I look back with roomy eyes. But right now, I'm just like, oh, thank God, thank God. People who describe it as like a birth, like they birth a book. First of all, that's super patronizing to women, I think. But if people describe it that way, I think that's not at all how I experience it. This is more like cutting out a tumor. Like you just like get it out, just get it done, move it on. So it felt more like that. That's not a great metaphor either. But hey, there you go. Yeah, yeah. So again, like self-reflection is not what I'm great at. Like I like to discover what I feel about a thing by going back and editing a chapter and being like, that's a weird thought. Is that really what I think? What was I going through? That's my mode of self-reflection. And that's one reason I'm just like so obsessed with creativity, I think, and making things. It's like, that's how I realize what I'm thinking. And I'm sure as an artist yourself, you can relate to that in some way. It's like that part of the process of creation is naturally self-reflective.
Mm-hmm. But also part of the process of creation is understanding the point where you can just kind of put something out there and then let it go. As you know, I think a tumor is a pretty drastic metaphor, but you could think of it as like, as a child, that it's like you're 18, you finished high school, just go.
That is nicer. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's better. Yeah. Use that. Put the robot voice on. Put that in.
No, man. Everybody's gonna know that you referred to it as a tumor.
Yeah, I mean, like I know you've yourself like worked on long projects, whether it's like undertaking education or opening a business or starting a brand, and those things take so long and so much determination and dedication, and to try to kind of like reflect on that is really difficult because you just sort of like I don't know. I think it's going to take me a few years to unpack it all. Right now, it's just relief.
Yeah, no, I mean, I totally understand. Like just because of COVID and the pandemic and everything, I had to shut down my tattoo studio. It's like,
that sucks.
Yeah, it's a really, really shitty feeling. But now that I think back on it, I've done a little bit of reflection, not too much, but I think overall the process and everything that I've done since then, getting into podcasting, that kind of stuff, I'm like, yeah, I'm happy. I'm good. as weird of a feeling it is. Yeah. But like you said, that was, it takes time. That was a year and a half ago. And so I've had time to kind of just like let it soak in and think like, yeah, it felt shitty at the time, but things happen, I can absorb all of that and move on and put it into other opportunities, but for you, like, how is it
really admirable? And that's, I mean, that is itself a victory. That's not like it. And if people who weren't able to do that and can't quite do that yet, I don't think that's a symptom of like, failure or weakness, because it's really hard. It's really hard to have made any sort of change during that crazy moment of tumultuous weirdness. And it's still difficult to reflect back upon it. So it's it's wonderful that you have been able to do that. That's impressive. So congratulations. That's wonderful.
Oh, well, thank you. The interview is about me now, so.
I'm fine with that.
Well, getting into the nitty gritty of the book, I'm kind of curious, like, you don't have to do too much reflection on it. I won't force you or anything, but now that you have this, the series that's completed, you have this cast of characters that for me, just as a reader, I've grown very attached to, their personalities and everything. For you, what is it like to have created Thomas Senlin and Maria the Sphinx and Valletta and Adam and all these different characters, and then kind of put them through these, I would call them tragic arcs, to say the least, and then close out their stories and let them live on as they are. How does that feel for you?
You know, it's weird. Yeah, I mean, it did seem like at some points I was just being a masochist. These poor people, and that wasn't my intention. I think that each of them is like special to me in a different way, and I've always disliked authors who talk about their characters as if they were friends, or real people. And I've always found that kind of suspicious or suspect. I'm like, yeah, come on, But you spend so much time thinking about these people and kind of trying to understand them, and then revisiting them over and over and over again, obsessing, waking up in the middle of the night, like writing lines of dialogue or questions about their life that you need to explore. You really do. They lodge themselves in your head. So it's weird. Part of me is like, I need to write a new thing, and I'm writing a new thing. But part of me is too like, just go back and write more with them, your friends, like, because you know them and you understand them, and you have their voices clearly established in your head. You write something new, you're like, who are these weirdo strangers? I don't like them. They don't seem as cool. So it's definitely like a little. I'm surprised by how attached I am to these characters, and how difficult it has been to kind of shed their voices and find new voices. But I guess you spend a decade doing something. That's the result.
It sinks in.
I could have learned Latin. I always think that I could have learned a language. I could have studied, like, I don't know, like some sort of medical ailment. But no, I have
Josiah,
Byron stuck in my head.
Is this what happens when you reflect? You're just full of regret,
yes.
thinking I didn't learn a language.
Yeah, this is why I don't reflect.
Oh crap! Is there like a particular character that whose arc or personality you had the most fun fleshing out and writing?
Yeah, it would definitely be Byron, just because Byron was a character who was a surprise to me as a writer when he showed up, but he came with a very clear and distinct voice, and I knew who he was immediately. And he's a lot of fun to write. And he had very little to do with the plot at the beginning. Like, I had the plot, clearly established in my head, the major points. And he didn't really have anything to do. And so it was just an act of authorial indulgence that I included him as heavily as I did in the second, or the third and the fourth book. I just decided, like, this is for me, and if people don't like it, well, that's okay. That's all right. But I wanted to spend more time with him because he was somebody that I kind of sympathized with, related to, and was just so easy to write. I don't know if you ever had those subjects, those things you're working on. You're like, if only all the projects could be like this. If only everything could be as easy, effortless, and fun as this, my life would be so much better. So, like, yeah, that was Byron for me. He was always a relief when I got to his scenes. But so while he didn't have anything to do with like the big plot in many ways, I think he had a lot of sort of value with exploring the characters, elucidating them as people, complex psychological wads, and I gave him a couple of moments in the final book that I'm pretty proud of. And I'm not generally proud of anything, so me saying that is significant. Yeah, pretty proud of Byron's arc in the final book.
I also really like him as a character. He's very, like you say, he's a good foil for the other characters in terms of providing context for, I would say, either their moral failings or their moral complexities. Basically, he's the neat freak, perhaps like you in some ways. He's along for the ride, and and
these are fair observations.
And he always has like, I think his internal dialogue is so brilliant because he has this obsessive compulsive nature to him where he's like, this is the way something should be and something's messing with it, and how do I fix that, and what can I do, and how can I just, reorganize the situation in order to make it what I had in my head. It's like the external world never matched his expectations.
Now I say I just wrote myself into the story, but gave myself antlers. God damn it! Should have seen that. So obvious. Yeah.
And when it comes
I'm the guy in the relationship with my wife. Though she will put a piece of paper down on the counter and she says, "This is an important piece of paper. Don't hide it." I'm like, "Oh, I'm not gonna move it. I'm not gonna touch it." And she leaves the room like, "I gotta move it a little bit. I just put it over here and this behind this. I'll put it in a drawer." And then she's like, "Where's that important piece of paper?" I'm like, I hid it. I don't know. I just had to hide it somewhere because I'm part squirrel.
It's like I had my place for it and it wasn't in that place, so I moved it to that place. What's wrong with it?
She's very, very patient.
Oh, well, I think that's the sign of a good spouse is you understand your partner's failings and you're patient with them as much as you can be. And
Right.
on that topic, how was it for you? I feel like the entire series, obviously it revolved around Thomas Senlin, and his search for his wife Maria. In terms of like how their relationship unfolds and the way that they develop as individuals apart from each other, and then I won't spoil anything for the end of the series, but how was it for you in terms of fleshing all of that out, giving Maria more page time as well as a character, and then ultimately kind of like bringing their narratives together?
Well, I think like part of it for me was just being so stuck in Tom's head and seeing her only through the lens of his understanding, especially when that lens of understanding was when he was really pretty unaware, like and self-obsessed. Like so he had this really limited understanding of her, and then that got more. It got romanticized, and then it got kind of turned into a foil for his own psychological trauma and turmoil. That when I went to her as a character, I really did not want it to be this sort of telegraphic continuation of Tom's impression of her. So she had to be distinct and suffering through her own discoveries and her own experience of the tower and her own concerns and frustrations. And so that was my aim. My aim with her was to, especially in the final book, to not just make her an appendage of Tom. So yeah, we'll see what people think. Now bringing, I don't want to talk about the end. I've already gotten some notes, and I know people are going to have their opinions about the way things end. And what can you do? Part of being a writer is just presenting people with your vision and then having them go like, yeah, but I would have done it differently. You're like, yeah, well, write a book.
This is my book and my series.
That's right.
But I think actually the choice on your part to make Maria more of a prominent voice, but also to give her a lot more agency, to delve into her trauma and her experiences, it worked well as a contextual what's the word? Like a contextual opposition to Tom in terms of like, this is what he's going through and this is what he has in his head. And then you actually meet Maria and get into her head. And you realize like Tom's perception of her is totally warped. He is just like off in dream world of an older man marrying a younger woman. And then you realize like, no, this is a woman who's going through her own stuff and she doesn't necessarily need this older man in order to live her life. But I thought you brought their stories together in a very nice way. And the ending, I won't spoil anything, obviously, but it was like unexpected in a way that I totally love because it's really weird, and I just love weird stuff. And so it's like the ending, it made sense with
You have come to the right place.
you've come to
Oh
the
boy,
right place.
that's my brand.
It ended in such a way that made sense emotionally in terms of all the relationships that these different characters have, and then it has a nice little twist on it that makes you think like, what the fuck is going on? And I love that feeling. I don't need everything to be tied up in a neat little bow, you know? Um, so to have it just like um, a little bit encouraging imagination and curiosity, I think is a beautiful way for people to perhaps inhabit the world themselves and think up potential futures for these characters beyond what has already been written on the page.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. That's a really a nice estimation of how the books conclude, the series concludes. Yeah, I personally don't like the stories that leave everything stitched up and pretend like, and then nothing of interest ever happened to this person again. And that is why we have looked away, is because they have told their story and they have now gone into the foggy mists of the past. It's like, no, the world continues to churn. Like a story is just parentheses that we place upon a segment of time. So of course there should be stuff that bleeds over, that is not just, it's like, my least favorite scene in any action movie is the one where they're like the hero is now sitting on the open ambulance, and he's got like a cold compress on his head, and then like his really buxom, attractive girlfriend or wife comes over, and is like, "Oh, you made it!" And he's like, "Yeah," and he smokes a cigarette, and then it's like, and it's all okay now. I'm like, I hate that. I hate everything about that. I hate that that's even like a thing. So yeah,
it's too fucking clean. It's
answer
just
to
like,
that.
get rid of
It
that.
is. It's so stupid. Yeah. So my hope is that at the end of the book, everyone, all the characters get at least some attention, and readers feel like they've been given a fair shake. So we'll see.
And how, from your perspective, starting the series, at what point did you realize like this is going to be 4 books and this is how it started, and starting to develop ideas of what it would be like towards the finale?
When I was writing Senlin, I got about 5 or 6 chapters into it, Senlin Ascends, and I was like, okay, I need to like come up with a rough idea of how this is going to go. And so I sat down and wrote some notes, and there was a point where I thought it would be 5 books, but by the time I finished Senlin Ascends, I was like, no, it has to be 4, because I'm not going to write 5 books. That's stupid.
It's just 4 is so much better than 5.
So yeah, and really, and people, I've heard like so many people like their criticisms like, it could have been 3. I'm like, it could have been none. Like, come on. I don't know what I was doing. I was just doing my best. My God. So I sat down. I had like a couple of beats. I was like, I know that this happens here. I know this happens here. I know this is where this all ends up. And I actually like wrote a couple of the scenelets that made it into the final 100 pages of the final book. So there were these moments I was always sort of churning towards, or these pivots that I was always preparing for, that were important to me. And I hope when people get to the end, they don't just think like, huh, this guy didn't have any idea what he was doing. Which is also a fair criticism, because I don't. I have no idea what I'm doing. This is the first series I've ever written, and I think hopefully the last, because I don't have 10 more years in me. I just don't. Oh my God, another like 4 book series sounds impossible. But this one, I did like plan out from the beginning. I was like, okay, the antagonist is going to be revealed here, and then so it was about a 2-page plan that I jotted up, and then characters sort of revealed themselves. So like in the original like kind of presentation, we didn't have a character like Byron. We didn't have a character like Anne. We didn't have a Ferdinand. These characters who showed up and presented themselves along the way. So there wasn't like this grand master plan, but the major movements were clear to me from the start. So I don't know. We'll see if people agree that it all comes together.
Yeah, and you heard it here
Or
first.
does it all fall apart?
Josiah's only writing one-offs from now on.
It's the truth. It's the truth. Like when I was talking to my publisher, then they were like, "Well, we should do another series." I was like, "Not gonna do it." And so like, "Well, I'll tell you, we'll give you a contract for a new series." I was like, "That's fine. It's not gonna be a series." I'm like, "All right, here's the contract for the new series." I'm like, "Not a series." I'm like, "Okay." So I
It's a
will write
3-book deal for 3
standalones.
separate books.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, I'm like, I want to do like kind of the Sherlock Holmes, Conan Doyle sort of thing, where each detective story is, entire and complete enough that you can read them out of order, and they have their own charm, and that's the new vision. And that way, if like halfway through this process, everyone like decides they don't like it, at least readers aren't left with the first book in a series, because series die all the time, and I feel like I would rather be able to give people complete stories and not make them wait 3 years and get weird messages from strangers. I just want, here's the story, here you go. I don't know what George Martin did to you, but like, I'm sorry that he hurt you so bad that you have to write strangers and complain.
He's traumatized the industry.
He really has. Oh my God.
Oh man. Well, I'm actually going back to we were talking about the characters. I was curious, at what point did you decide, okay, Senlin Ascends is very much from Tom's perspective. It's centered around him. His name's in the title. He's going through his initial thrust into the Tower of Babel, but later in the books you start to get these alternate POVs, and I really appreciate it because it gives you good internal description and good internal monologue and all this kind of stuff of different characters. I really love Voletta because you get alternate scenes from characters that are within the same scene as her, and then you get it from her perspective, and you realize her way of thinking, and she's just so fucking like out of it and all over the place. ADD, I want to climb this, I want to touch that, don't make me do things, I want to do my own thing. And I really like that you gave this cast of characters the room to breathe and develop and kind of, like you say, like come into their own and allow their arcs and their personalities and everything to reveal themselves. So at what point did you decide, like, I'm going to give these characters more due?
From the start of Senlin Ascends, like Senlin had an important job, which was as sort of the fuse for the exploration and the explication of the tower. But I thought that if the entire series was told from his point of view, it, one, be very limited in its observations, and two, be ultimately sort of claustrophobic, because his way of seeing the world, while astute in many regards, is also a little exhausting. And so I wanted to give a fuller portrait of the tower, a fuller exploration of this world, which required like different lenses with which to see it. And so, by the end of Senlin Ascends, I hope I had set up this cast of characters who each had a different sort of perspective to bring, because I didn't at any point want this just to be like the saga of Tom. And I know like some readers have not appreciated that choice. That, and I understand that. Like, you're introduced to Luke Skywalker at the beginning. Like, I want Luke in every scene. I just want Luke to be there. I want him with his lightsaber, and I like Luke. And who's this other guy? And I understand like how having an ensemble cast is like it's risky. But I feel like you get a fuller sense of the world. You get a fuller sense of the tower. You get even a fuller sense of Senlin, if that's like your jam, by having these other characters. So I mean, from the beginning, that was the plan. But yeah, it was a gamble. It was a risk.
But I totally agree. It gives you, like you say, more perspectives within the tower. You have people that were born in the tower. You have people that came to the tower. All of them have their differing experiences and journeys throughout this crazy place. but they all converge at some point in order to influence each other's lives. And that's where the beauty lies in it. It's like this dysfunctional found family kind of vibe. And I really, really enjoyed that throughout. And that's what kept me invested, is like the characters. That's what got me to book 4, you know? And like you say, the world itself is full of curiosities. It's a strange place that is so unique that it deserves to have multiple perspectives, giving more depth to this fucked up tower that is the Tower of Babel. And I'm really curious, like, how did you create the tower itself? Like, how did you kind of come up with the idea? But beyond that, I think there are 64 ringdoms, correct? So for listeners, ringdoms are essentially every level of the tower has a different kingdom that serves a certain purpose, has a certain aesthetic, has its own leadership and everything like that. It's unique denizens, to say the least. And so going up, every ringdom changes. And I think in the last 2 books, you did a really good job of creating interest in and sparking curiosity in terms of like dropping names here and there, giving little descriptions of a ringdom. And I'm just like, my mind just spins. I'm thinking like, what is that place like? I want to visit there. And, since you do focus in the early books mostly on the lower 6, but then as the series progresses, there is little popping in and out of different ringdoms. So what was your approach to the tower in the beginning? And then, how did you approach it later on when you're sprinkling in more information about what this tower has and what's its purpose?
Well, it's complicated because one of the reasons that I came up with the Everyman's Guide, which gives a lot of the epigraphs that start the chapters, is I wanted to give a sense of scope to the reader, to say like we're looking at this monumental thing, this nation stacked like a layer cake, from the point of view of one kind of myopic dude. And that's not going to give you a sense of scope. It's not going to give you a sense of history. It's not going to give you a sense of the enormity of it. And so, I came up with these little techniques to give some glimpses into what I conceived of as the tower. But, it was never something that I intended to draw completely. Like, there's no way with 4 books to articulate this thing that I have roughly assembled in my mind. So yeah, part of it is, hold on. I developed these techniques, narrative techniques, like the epigraphs, to create that sense of history. But the tower is reflective of my own experience of like the world, in the sense that when I was a kid, I moved around a lot. I kind of had to habituate myself to some new place and figure out a way to get by, and that sort of disjointed experience of life became formative for the tower itself. So while there is this unity of like this continuity of structure, there is this wild difference in the different locations. So the books and the tower in many ways is and this is really super obnoxious. And even as I say this as a writer, I understand it's kind of autobiographical. It's reflective of my understanding of the world. That part of life is just sussing out where you are, figuring out who your friends are, figuring out what the pitfalls are, what the function is of a place, of a location, of a culture, of a society. How do I fit in? So a lot of the genesis of the tower is, sadly, I think, just a reflection of my own experience. I wish it was more. I wish I could say I had been visited by aliens who gifted me with some knowledge that I was trying to share obliquely with the world. it's not the case. It's just, again, this sort of method of exploring my own experience of things. Yeah. So the tower, I am the tower. Put that on a T-shirt. And I'm sorry.
You are the bricklayer.
Yes, of course.
But I think that's actually quite a nice sentiment, though, because every writer, as much as they admit it or not, is infusing so much of themselves into their stories and their locations. A lot of the experiential aspects of it is like, this is something that the writer experienced and might be trying to sort out in their own head, and it's conveyed through fiction. So for you, it's like your experiences with the world condensed into a tower, and a lot of the very human difficulties and junctures that we meet along the way are represented by all these different ringdoms, and how each of them presents a unique challenge. Each of them presents a unique culture, oftentimes language, oftentimes, oftentimes social nuances. I think there's one ringdom in the fourth book that just made me laugh my ass off because everybody's naked, and it's like the social nuances of this naked ringdom is so brilliant. So I appreciate that, and I mean, I appreciate your honesty as much as you think it's a selfish thing to represent your life experiences through the form of this tower. But it's very the result is very honest world building, and the result is very humorous at times. Most of the time it's humorous. So
that's good. Yeah. If you can't laugh at yourself, you can't understand the humor of existence. It's a pretty bleak thing that we go through every day. So I think it's good to have a little levity. I was talking to a friend at one point, like during like the I'm sorry, this is like the last anecdote I'll give you, but like I was talking to a friend at one point during the drafting of Arm of the Sphinx. I sent them the chapters of the Silk Reef, where the landscape is just consumed by swarms of drove spiders. And he was like, what is this about? It's like, well, I don't like spiders. He's like, is that it? Like, yeah, just don't like spiders. This entire ringdom is conceived of a basic phobia that I suffer from. So sometimes it's just like getting the nightmares out.
Yeah. And right now, as you speak to me from your parents' basement, and there very likely could be a spider somewhere up in there.
Oh my God! Oh my
up
God!
In those rafters.
No, there's not any spiders in here. I'm pretty sure we're fine.
I just ruined the interview. It's like, I'm out, man. I'm done.
I gotta check everything. I'm gonna shake out my clothes.
Oh man. Well, actually, on the note of humor, I think your take on satire, self-deprecation, all these different things, and the way humor presents itself in the point of view from different characters, it brings a lot of soul into the series. And I think the world building itself is steeped with humor in terms of all the different odd intricacies of each ringdom, and the I don't know how to say this, the posh idiocy of many of the residents of the tower, and how they're just oblivious to certain things that are going on. And that presents really funny scenarios. And for you, obviously, just talking to you, I can see you have a very sarcastic and just humorous approach to conversation, to life. What is it like to kind of like put satire and humor into the text, and what does it give you to be able to like convey a story in such a way that you find funny, and then hopefully readers find funny too?
Yeah, hopefully, yeah, that's always a trick. I was very much influenced growing up by Pratchett and Douglas Adams. When I was a kid, I had all the Monty Python skits on audio tape, not videotape, on audio tape, and I would just listen to them. So I love both satire and that sort of absurdist sense of humor, and it's just something that I personally find helpful in bleak circumstances or things that are confounding. And so that's one reason I've always wanted to sprinkle it into my work to give readers a break, because I think sometimes I can get a little maudlin, a little bleak, and I don't want just to make people unhappy. Like, I do want to entertain people. I think ultimately, like that's my goal. It's not. I don't want to be deep. I don't care about being remembered. Legacy is something that only matters to egotists. That's not what I want to entertain people. I want to delight them. So the humor is in many ways for me sort of like the lubricant that makes the sort of rough cogs of my stories churn. Boy, man, I'm really laying out the similes tonight. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that, like, since I was sort of a rambling kid, you learn early on that humor, and especially self-deprecating humor, is a very good tool for ingratiating yourself with strangers. Like, one of the things I've learned about strangers is they are always happy to laugh at you along with you. So just go ahead and get ahead of that and make yourself part of that experience. So growing up, it was definitely like sort of a defense mechanism where you just if you're leading the laughter, it's okay. So, yeah.
And I think if you in the future decide to get on stage and do stand-up comedy, the best way to get a crowd on your side is to just shit on yourself. And then you can just say whatever.
No.
Then you can just say not whatever you want, to some degree.
No.
But you can ease the tension, lubricate the situation.
I think a lot of times, and this is understandable, an audience, whether it's a reader or someone sitting in an auditorium, thinks, I bet this guy thinks he's better than I am. I bet he thinks he's got it all figured out, and he's a smarty. Well, I don't think he is, and I really don't. Like, I whenever someone is critical of my work, I'm like, yep, you're right. Could have done it better. Could have done it different. It's sincere that, like, I do want to entertain people, and I understand that it doesn't always work out. But yeah, humor makes that sort of suspicion a little lessened. It ameliorates that suspicion of a authority figure, the person who's making words appear in people's heads and images flash up here. Like, it's a good way to be like, hey, don't worry, I don't like me either. And then okay, this might be okay. We'll keep going.
And you use that to good effect in the novel, in the novels as well, because Senlin, for instance, he's a pretty awkward dude, and oftentimes he misuses humor in an attempt to soften the situation, but then sometimes it backfires in his face. And overall, I think you use humor in a good way, like you said, to sort of like contrast all the masochistic stuff you do to your characters. But you also play it to good effect, where it's like not every character views things in the same way, whether it's humorous or not. And not every character is genuinely funny in the way that they think they are.
Who are you alluding to there?
I'm alluding to you, Josiah.
Now, I wanted the character who I think is the funniest in the series is probably Iron. Like, she doesn't come out with much, but when she does, I'm like, I like that. I like that joke. That I think that if I was at a party, I would gravitate to her, because she wouldn't talk a whole lot. She'd be sort of laconic and reserved. But when she laid down some little comment, some little bit of snark, it would make me smile. So yeah, I did have fun, like, trying to envision different types of humor, and it's fun. That's the point.
For sure. And now that you're done with the series, are you thinking of returning to it at any point, or do you feel like, no, this is a closed book and I'm happy and satisfied with how things have ended?
I don't know. don't know. If you asked me that this morning, I'd have a different answer. It changes a lot. I think the thing is, man, I don't know. It would be, I would have to really believe that the story that I wanted to tell next was the story that needed to be told. Because I would be very conscious of the fact that it could be interpreted by readers as a cynical cash grab. Like, and I never liked those needless sequels where like they give you a sequel, like, but I didn't want this. Why did you make me read this or watch this or what? This was. Did you just look? If you needed $5, just let me know. I'll give you $5, but don't make me like watch this whole movie. That's how I feel about a lot of.
I'm looking
sequels.
at you, Walking Dead. So, that's enough.
No. It needed 13 seasons. How many seasons have we gone through?
And a couple of spin-off shows too.
Like 9. Oh my, that's right, spin-offs. Yeah. Well, if you ever go to a Comic-Con, there's at least 9 actors from The Walking Dead. So they're out there.
If you're a fan,
so I will say I could. If you're a fan, I could go back to the tower one day. I do have ideas. I have some things that I've written. I have some outlines, but I have to convince myself that it's worthwhile. And so one of the things I'm doing right now is just taking a step back, and I'm writing something different in a different universe with different characters, different sort of subgenre, to challenge myself, but also because I want to try to write a mystery. I've always really enjoyed watching procedural mysteries and mystery shows, reading detective novels. I've always enjoyed that. And I've always thought like, yeah, I could do that. And so part of what I'm doing now is proving that, no, I can't. I don't know what I'm doing. Why would I think that? Why would I think just because I watched the thing, I've mastered it?
But you can learn. You can learn.
I hope so. I've told people I can, which is always like, I think the first step in any great creative endeavor, you just lie to somebody and say, oh yeah, no, I can do that. Nope, I can do that.
And then they sign you on for a trilogy and you're like, oh shit, what did I sign up for?
Yeah, I just start working on this thing then. We'll see.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, whatever you end up writing in the future, I'm actually very curious to read your take on mysteries. If you want to divulge any more about that or just leave it a mystery for now.
Well, the title is the Hexologists. I wanted to try something that was set in a different sort of milieu. So it's set, I gotta stop using those big words. It was set at a different time in a different place. And so I'm doing that. And it's set in the 1920s. So sort of like roaring.
Was that your George
Gatsby.
Bush?
No, that was just my Southern accent. So yeah, sort of my George Bush.
It sounded a lot like George Bush.
Oh God, well that's awful. That's why I use when I talk to my Southern family on the phone. I gotta adjust that a little bit. Dial that down. So it's gonna be set in the 1920s, but in a parallel universe. Of course, there's magic, which I really haven't done before, but I thought it'd be interesting. There's dragons, haven't done that before, thought it'd be interesting. Yes, I'm having fun. This is kind of a palate cleanser, a moosh boosh. And if people are like, stop that, I will stop it. I'm gonna give it a shot.
I'll have one book out, and then you tell me if I stop it.
Well, it's fair.
Awesome.
Okay. Again, well, don't know what I'm doing.
Just along for the ride. It's all in good fun. So we spoke before the recording started about what you're currently reading, watching, or listening to. But since you're a parent, I know as a parent myself how freaking difficult it is. What would you like to watch or read or listen to?
I don't know how you do this, but like I have like aspirations, and so I'll start something that I'm like, I need to have like a little bit more, I don't know, robust culture, some sort of input that counteracts the potty books, etc. And so I was like, I'll read some Voltaire. So I'm trying to read this Voltaire, and I'm like, oh my God, I forgot that I don't like Voltaire. And I'm just like making myself read a couple of pages every day. But it's like I'm just like eating a dry Weetabix. Just like I'm like, why am I doing this to myself? I don't enjoy it. I don't have much time for reading, and yet I don't know. Yeah, it's like one of the things like you're just trying to decide between juggling. Like, do you take more vitamins and exercise in your free time, or do you just lie on the floor like a piece of shit and do nothing? And I really just want to lie on the floor. I just want to lie on the floor, face down,
why are you
and
punishing yourself with Voltaire? Like, come on.
I don't know. That's what this is a confession. I have no idea.
You're a parent, so you have potty books, of course. But then, like, why read Voltaire? That's just like
it should be Desaad. You're right. You're right.
Dick.
Potty books, Desaad. That's what makes Desaad. I missed the obvious answer. Yeah, I don't know what I'm doing. I watched the first like 3 episodes of Squid Game, and I was like, wow, this is really interesting and well done. But I fell asleep each time during the episode, and so I'd wake up and be like, all right, okay, and then I try to rewind it, but I'm really sleepy, and then I get to the end of the episode, I'm like, I don't think I really got that. So I need to like watch it with some stimulants. Like I just need to, I don't just watch it like with a pot of coffee on a weekend when I'm not a parent anymore. So I don't know.
I'm glad coffee was the stimulant that you decided on. I was like, oh, I'll send you some MDMA. It's fine.
I have to say, like, I appreciate other people's, use of substances, but like, I don't think anybody wants this on the stimulant. This is already a little too much. This is not. We don't need any stimulants. No. But yeah, no. So I haven't. We started watching. The last movie I enjoyed. I did have something I was going to say. I watched the Cruella movie.
Oh yeah,
that's like it's like I'll vet this for my 3-year-old who might watch it in 9 years. I don't know why. Really enjoyed it. Like, I mean, the set design, the costuming, the direction, the acting. Great movie. Didn't get a lot of attention. Didn't get a lot of love. Thought it was excellent. Really liked it. I watched the Black Widow movie over the course of 7 evenings. So take that for what it's worth. Also enjoyed it. I mean, I think one of the things about being a parent is like I'm just so grateful. I'm just so grateful for stories, entertainment. Like I don't know if my standards are changing or what, but I'm just like that was pretty great. So, but what are you watching or reading?
And also
going through.
Also, just to appreciate the fact that it's like I can do things in increments and it's fine, even if it's a movie, it's like I don't have to do it in one sitting. It's okay.
When someone talks about binging, aren't you like, oh, come on, don't show off with your binging time?
Like, what do you do with your day? Right now, my wife and I watched Dune last week over the course of 2 nights, but I'm happy that I got to see it, and it was very good. We're actually doing a Dune cast for the podcast in a couple weeks. So,
that's
and then
awesome.
also,
so you liked it?
I liked it. I'm a huge Frank Herbert fan. I love Dune. I have some criticisms, but overall, I think
better than David Lynch.
David Lynch is just a fucking like nightmare fuel, crazy disaster, beautiful mess. And I love it for the campiness. But I think Denis Villeneuve, I think that's how you pronounce his name. He has done right with like so many franchises and things that I love. Like Arrival was excellent. Blade Runner 2049 was excellent.
Yeah.
And I think he approached this with like the same sort of passion and love, and that really shows through. Mm-hmm. It was just like some nitpicky criticisms, but overall it was really good. I'm also watching Y: The Last Man, despite the fact that halfway through the season it got canceled.
Y: The Last Man? Is this a show?
So it's based on a comic from the early 2000s. I don't know if you know Brian. I think it's Bogan. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, but he does this comic called Saga. And then Y: The Last Man was something that he did before that. But it's basically like post-apocalyptic. All the men in the world die except for one, and kind of like imagining what a world run by women would be like in the wake of all these men dying very brutally.
So, but it got canceled already. It's like
yeah, it's like the first season's gonna air, and then they just canceled it, and hopefully it gets picked up by another channel or video provider, whatever. So yeah, then there's that. Very, very happy to be starting Jade Legacy by Fonda Lee, and love that series. And then I'm just going on like a Jeff Noon
it's
binge.
excellent. I mean, I
don't know if you've read anything about Jeff Noon.
I have. I was influenced by him as a young writer.
Yeah, so I'm chatting with him in a couple weeks, and I've been binging some of his older stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And it's like a weird,
what are you reading?
Fever dream. I read Vert for the first time, and
Vert is so great,
crazy and awesome. Yeah,
but great. Yeah. Oh yeah, that was my introduction, and I remember like for like weeks after that, I wrote tons of really terrible short fiction that was set that sort of sliver. I was like, I could do this. Really couldn't. Like he has this talent for making that sort of gonzo unreality very real. And that's so you're going to be talking to him.
Yeah, I'll be talking to Jeff, and then I'm going through his Nyquist Mysteries series. So if you're in the mood for like good mysteries, but also with that like Jeff Noon sort of trippiness, I highly recommend those. They're really, really good.
Maybe I should like give up the Voltaire and do the Jeff Noon. You know, I mean,
just do it, man. It's like I don't know why you're fooling yourself with this pretentious Voltaire stuff.
I'm trying to impress people who aren't here, who will never care. Oh, but they would be impressed if they were.
It's fine, man. You're in your parents' basement praising Voltaire. It's like,
oh, I have made no progress.
Oh man. All right. Well, on that pretentious note, we'll close out. And Josiah, thank you so much for the time. If you could let listeners and viewers know where they can find you on social media, and also pick up the Fall of Babel and the rest of the series. It's all out. All available for your purchasing desires.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Bancroft Josiah. Like just reverse it because I deleted my last Twitter handle. You can also go to my website at thebooksofbabel.com and sign up for my newsletter that I will never send you. So if you like to have an empty email box, like I can help with that.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Josiah. I appreciate you taking the time.
Well, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much.